Poland's macroeconomic forecast is changing. Indicators are shifting, and so expectations are changing too. To find out more, I'm joined this afternoon by Professor Witold Orłowski, Chief Economic Advisor to PricewaterhouseCoopers in Poland. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon. Hello.
So Poland's inflation is at 4.4%, growing, although lower than projected by some analysts. But it's only going to get worse as we head into 2025. According to you, how badly do you think it's going to hit Poles?
Well, first of all, the inflation is broadly in line with what has been expected. I mean, some analysts expected a bit more, some a bit less, but we've got... we had for 3 months or 4 months the inflation well below the actual levels, because the market levels, because we had the energy prices frozen for the households. And it was absolutely clear that at the moment when the prices are unfrozen, and it partially happened in July, from July the 1st this year, from June, I guess, the 1st, from July, we will, it was absolutely clear that we would see the increase of the inflation to something that's closer to an actual inflation of Poland. It's still not the actual inflation, because still the energy prices the government hasn't decided to raise the prices to the market level. Still, we've got the below the market level prices the household pay. The result is that on the one hand, the inflation, the headline inflation is lower than otherwise would have been, but the government must pay some subsidy to energy firms to compensate for the losses, eventual losses that would have happened otherwise. So this is not sustainable. It must be eliminated. But the government did not decide to make it at once. If the government decided to eliminate any freezing of the energy prices immediately, then most likely we would have landed with some inflation of around between 5 and 6%. Given that only, let's say, between 1/3 and half of this energy price increase that was necessary has been introduced, and the rest was postponed to the next year, we only have the increase of the inflation to 4.2%.
Well, speaking of the government. Speaking of the government, in June, Poland's Finance Minister Domański assured Poles that inflation would not exceed 5% this year. So I wanted to ask, is that something that we can expect? Because we've still got a few months before the end of 2024.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would expect something like that, although I wouldn't, risk my hand. It may happen that the inflation will exceed slightly 5%, depending on what's happening on the global markets and so on and so on. Definitely we will be with the biggest probability will be somewhere between 4 and 5%, probably closer to 5 than 4. I would hesitate to say that I'm sure that it will not be 5.1, for example. A lot depends on the energy prices, global energy prices, on the exchange rate, and so on, many elements that are unknown. But still, having said so, I must add that the most likely inflation this year is between 4 and 5% by the end of this year. But by the end of the next year, probably a bit more.
Speaking of energy, the extent of the removed energy caps, tell us what you think and how much you think it will impact us as we move into Q4.
Well, this year, the problem is that those are the political decisions, right? Nothing to do with the economics. And even this year, there was the expectation that the government will allow for increases prices more, while the government decided to allow for less. We still do not know what is going to happen with the political decisions in the rest of this year and in the beginning of the next year. But the most likely scenario is that the energy prices increased now. Still, as I said, the prices are controlled in a sense that the government is is compensating the energy companies for lower than market level of prices. The most likely scenario is that this level of energy prices will continue for the rest of this year, and somewhere probably in May, June next year, we'll see the further increase of the energy prices, bringing the inflation to most likely to some 6%.
Okay, I wanted to just go back to inflation and bring it into real estate a little bit. So the last time inflation was going up, Poles started buying flats. And the indicator is not reaching historic levels yet, but are we going to see similar behavior, basically moving money into safer assets, shall we say?
Well, the interest rates paid by the banks are relatively low, and this is a situation when people are searching for the alternative ways of investing their savings. But on the other hand, they are a bit misled, because the previous government had the program of subsidizing the housing credit, the mortgage loans for, let's say, for young families. This government, although is preparing a program like that, for the time being hasn't been started, but is under preparation. And if it starts, there is immediately the extra demand on the market, like it happened the previous year, and immediately there is a big increase of the new apartments. The problem is that majority of people do not recognize the fact that this is the kind of one-time effect, and that encourage them to think that the housing prices, the price of apartments, real estate prices are going to grow endlessly at a high speed. It's not only in Poland. The same happened in the United States, for example, 20 years ago, when the extra money for the mortgages, so-called subprime mortgage loans, made everybody believe that the real estate prices will be growing by 15% forever. And then, if you remember, that led to the big crisis on the real estate market. I do not expect a big crisis on the Polish real estate market, but this element of overheating the market at the moment when people see the prices growing, and therefore they assume that this is an absolutely safe way of investing with incredible profits. Unfortunately, my feeling is that we'll have a new wave of this type of situation. For the time being, the price of new apartments kind of not only slowed down, but I guess they stabilized. But this is only in expectation of the new government finance credit, program of credit, subsidized credits. Once again, you will have the acceleration of prices.
Well, I just wanted to unpack that a little further, because I know that you recently wrote a commentary in the Rzeczpospolita Daily where you were quite critical about that starter program. And I wanted to ask you: is there a silver bullet? Is there a solution? How would you address this problem?
Well, okay, it's difficult to say in 2 words, but basically this is what I wrote. By the way, the Minister of Finance had similar comments while assessing, and the central bank while assessing this program prepared by one of the ministries. The point is that the key element in solving the housing problem in Poland is not helping a few tens of thousands of families to buy the apartments, but it is to make the renting of the apartments more cheaper and somehow more available for young families. And we've got a choice: either we spend money on kinds of subsidizing a group, let's say 50,000 families, for buying new apartments. By the way, that leads immediately to the increase of prices, and therefore the developer companies are actually taking a big share of this subsidy from the government as their extra profit. this is the one way, and this is what the Ministry of Development is preparing. I belong to those ones that believe that the key to the problem is to put all the money the government wants to spend on that on supporting the development of housing for rentals. And that means making this building of those apartments cheaper and maybe subsidizing some form of the investment in this, or at least subsidizing, or at least treating it in a better way from the taxation point of view, and therefore making the rents of apartments lower, and this way helping hundreds of thousands or even millions of households, not 50,000.
Okay, we're going to have to end our conversation there. Professor Witold Orłowski, Chief Economic Advisor for PricewaterhouseCoopers in Poland. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.
And that was all that we have for you today on Business Arena. Thank you so much for joining us. For more business stories, check out tvpworld.com and tvpworld_com on X. Thanks so much for joining us. I was your host, Marie Cato.